I'm fully aware that we're in a budget workshop. Anybody that needs that much time or more time, you are welcome to it. But the floor is open now for any other discussion. Ms. Baumgartner.
First of all, thank you, Mr. White, for your presentation. One of the suggestions we had from the community, which is along the lines of what you were talking about, is getting people from our community, maybe working, get business and board leaders and all that into looking at not only revenues, but expenditures and legislation, dealing with our legislators, because sometimes they need to hear from more than just the board members. But I do think that idea of a committee with board members is a very good one, and I think that may be something we want to consider for next year.
Ms. Hammond.
Mr. White, I'm afraid you're going to take Lynn Richardson's job. He did such a good job at those charts.
Well, he gave me all the numbers.
I wanted you to explain to us, and Mr. White mentioned it, but it was one of my questions that I was interested in finding out. I know the changing fund formula. Do you actually understand that as far as to explain it to us, how it's changed and how much it does, not literally in numbers, but how it affects a district like ours? Because I know that's one of the big debates that we are arguing as a better off district in trying to redistribute the funds. But I wanted to see what that funding formula was, or you to explain it to me.
I'll give it my best shot. Basically, what we're talking about is the EFA, the Education Finance Act. Excuse me. I guess probably at the last 11th hour, last summer, the formula that had been in place since 1977 changed. And basically what it did was put in a poverty factor, which takes money from districts like us and redistributes it to the less wealthy districts. And as a result of that, there was not a whole lot of extra money added to the EFA. That's what's referred to, commonly based to the cost. So what you see is we're getting a smaller piece of the pie each year.
And is it an amount that really does, like let's say in this budget, the amount we're short, how much of that is because of that one formula? Is it as much as $1 or $2 million?
Well, I haven't run the numbers, but possibly it could be. Okay. And I actually have run the numbers in prior years, but I just don't have those off the top of my head.
Well, Mr. Gant, if I might, this is just different because we had a long time, and I think it's important we hear from every single board member. I want to say one of the things I'm a fighter of Act 388 in the sense that it does pit citizens and businesses against each other and puts our teachers and our administrators and anyone in education, we're sort of in the middle if that's our employment. But I know that everyone on this school board would do nothing to harm our education system. And I don't think that we are, I know we all want to totally and fully fund this budget. But I think that and one of the speakers said it, I'm not sure which one, there's certainly room for compromise. And I think businesses bring in new and young families because they want to set up a business where it will succeed and where there are good schools. And the schools is the number one thing. But I think that we need to have conversation, with us here. To me, that's what a workshop is, where I can hear what Ms. Baumgartner or Ms. Lovelace and Mr. Gant think, and of course Ms. Watson and Mr. White. But I want the teachers and the administrators up there to know that there's no compromise. None of us are going to ever compromise, teacher pay or teachers having the funding the classroom. That's the most important thing we do. But it's nothing wrong. Like Ms. Baker said, we have got to have conversation, and we have got to sometimes look for, some type of common ground. And one thing I'm excited about, and I want to tell the whole board this, and I brought some packets from it. There is a movement in the House and the Senate, finally, and I think they're here, and they did a survey, Rick Quinn, and I think Chip is part of it. They're doing a survey from 18,000 businesses. to see what they think about this 388. And they're realizing they need to rattle the chains and say, you know, it's hurting education. So I think we're going to see reform in that. And I just would like to see us I want to fund this budget, not their ideas to do it. I want to see it done and not hurt businesses. And I think to 15.7 mils, I think that's a lot in one swoop. So just to my fellow board members, I mean, it's something we have to talk about. But I think that there are compromises where we can still fund that budget and not hurt one single program or classroom and still take care of our businesses for one more year and get this legislature to get it straight. I think they're finally hearing it. They're hearing from businesses. I mean, 18,000 businesses in Lexington County are sending back in this survey, and I have a copy of it I'll give to board members. But that's my 2 cents, and I'm one of 7. But I can just tell you that I don't want any fear tactics, that because if there's any of us that vote in a different way to fund it, that we are against education, because there's not a single person on this board that would ever hurt education. Not ever. That's what I wanted to say, and I'd love to hear from all the members.
I do have one question. On your presentation, on the increase, I'm seeing on the public hearing that our change is $3,904,100. Did that one sit there and say $3,700,000? So has this changed again on this one, or is this the change? Or was I looking at something different?
Sorry, I got technology challenged apparently. I'm sorry, what was the question again?
I thought when you were going through your presentation that you said the change was $3,700,000 and so many dollars, which I didn't write that down.
In the expenditures?
Yeah, and so is it changed from $3,904,000, or is this something that I'm looking at differently? Did I see? I mean,
The number that he's showing there, the $3,094,100, is the amount of change that I showed in the
Okay.
presentation.
so, okay, I'm sorry. I was just.
You may have picked up something different.
I probably did. Yeah, got a lot of charts.
Mr. Haltwanger.
I actually have a few comments, really, to what Mr. White has presented. But first of all, I'd like to comment on some of the concerns from the public participation part earlier. And I took notes on just about all of it. And each one of them, in their comments, said, do not do what's best for our students, in addition to all the other things that they had to say, which I'm not going into. And they all were good, actually good comments, and I like the one that Ellen mentioned about the committee coming together and looking at things as a community. I think that's a very good idea. But my comment here is that we have to ask ourselves, back to Dr. Hefner's statement about whether or not you want to be extraordinary or if you want to be ordinary. And I think I read somewhere that someone says, good is the enemy of great. Do you want to be good or you want to be great? If you want to be a great athlete, it requires a whole lot of work, and effort. So I think we have to ask ourselves, if we want to continue to provide the excellence in education, the kind that make people, families want to live here and work here and raise their children here? Or do you want to see a decline in the quality of education that our children deserve to receive? I was at Miss Lagon's school one night a few weeks ago, Nursery Road, And a young man asked me, he said, I went to school with one of your sons. I recognize your last name. And I sat behind him in algebra class. I said, well, when I see him, I'm going to see him in a few days. Matter of fact, I said, I'll tell him I saw you. And then he asked me the question. He said, well, I'm about your son's age. Do you have other children? I said, no, I don't have any other children younger than he is. So I said, I have a couple of grandchildren. And he said, do they go to school here? I said, no, they go to school in Charleston. They live in Charleston. So he said, why did you run for school board if you don't have any children here? So I kind of laughed and I said, well, that should tell you what I'm doing is not about my children. It's not about me as an individual. And I think what I see and one of the concerns I have is that what we do can't be about us. It can't be about Larry Haltwanger or anybody else. It can't be about one single individual. It can't even be about what I want. It has to be about what's best for young people. And again, I say they deserve, and I don't use that word very much, deserve, because we don't deserve very much, number one. But they deserve the best that we can offer and provide for them. But as Ed so eloquently presented, we've got to look at things not our human eyes. Because our human eyes often fool us. We don't see what's really in front of us. And it's a dim view of actually what's going on according to what we've seen here. And as he said, there's raising to the maximum millage doesn't solve the problem, obviously. If we understand his graph here, it doesn't really solve it. And I think Ms. Hammond mentioned, and some other board members mentioned, and he mentioned, we have to begin another conversation with those people that we send to the intersection of Main and Gervais Street. And it starts and ends there. We have to begin to express our concerns in terms of what is just and what is right. And I think we'll be doing the right thing because, again, I told a young man, I didn't get on here not to do what's right, because the day I don't do what's right is the day I'll say, I'm going home and sit on the porch, okay? So my desire is always, and I'm human, but my desire is to do what's right and what's proper and to do it by these young people. And thank you so much, Mr. Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Haltwanger. Ms. Baumgardner.
First of all, thank you for your beautiful comments, Mr. Haltwanger. I know, but it's one of the things I want to just kind of express, I appreciate that you've looked at ways to reduce our budget. But I notice in the budget that math interventionists and some reading coaches positions have been realigned or redirected, I think is the word you used. And one of the ways that we're an extraordinary district is not our high flyers. You can take some of these kids we have and put them in the poorest school district and they'll fly. But is our special ed and our kids that are getting interventions such as this, that's really part of our being extraordinary. And I hope we're not, our at-risk kids are, these programs are even identified by our state legislatures, which we've been denigrating all night, but even then our politicians are saying that these programs are needed and they're wanting to have them in our at-risk district. So, I understand, but I do want us to keep, our at-risk kids at a priority, because it may be the weakest link, but it's really what makes us extraordinary.
I appreciate that very much, and part of that is driven, again, by goal number one, being able to ensure that everyone continues to have a job. And I don't know the exact number of interventionists we have, but they are all certified in areas where we have job openings. So that's one of the things that drives that. And there are other factors there too, but please know that's not something that I wish to recommend. It's just when you have to cut 1.4 million, how do we do that and honor our commitment to ensure that the people who have jobs this year will also have jobs next year?
I know Mr. White was in here talking about me being concerned as a business owner. Well, first of all, I think every one of y'all in here know how much I love this district and how much I love each and every one of y'all, because I think I've seen me gracious many times. I am, and I want y'all to know that I am concerned with the fact of what if we raise the millage as high as we're going to raise it, that it could affect the small business. You know, we happen to be, we have rental. You know, we haven't been able to raise our rent for years because it's stagnant. And, you know, and eventually it could be where we end up having to raise our rent so high that we will not be able to even put anybody in our buildings. And that could hurt us terribly. But I have listened to everything that we have been saying today, and I will take everything in consideration and look at everything. I think some of the things that Ms. Baker said, I think we all kind of starting to agree with this, that maybe we all ought to have groups together and communicate and see what we can do to keep our district the best we can be, because as we all up here sit there and say, there's not a soul up here that does not love this district. But we all have a little bit of, sometimes we think a little differently, and I think that's what makes us so great, is that we can come up with different thoughts and different ideas and come up with still to keep this district where we want to keep it.
Well said, Ms. Lovelace, but I also wanted to sort of piggyback what Ms. Baumgarten was talking about. It made me think, do we have a different class size for, let's say, in our Title I schools, Dr. Hefner, because I've had several teachers, you know, I've been concerned about that, because it is harder, you know, if you have, and I'm a teacher, I know, depending on the level of child you have, we especially in our elementary, you need them small.
The answer to that is yes.
But does it vary? That was a question I know we have a class size, but does it vary with the child that needs more help? Do we have a lower class size for them, or do we not? Because I know some teachers in Title I and they have like 25 kids, which is a lot to me for the...
Say that last statement again.
I just know of some teachers that have, in elementary in a Title I school, that have, and it made me think when she said that have like 25 in a class, which I think is kind of high for at-risk kids.
Dr. Milton, is that correct information there?
Well, it depends on the grade level, Ms. Hammond. To answer your question, yes, there are some staffing ratios for Title I schools. We are primarily directing it towards the primary grades, which would be kindergarten through third grade. Now, when we get into fourth and fifth grade, that's where our ratios move closer to the district average of 24.
These were fourth and fifth. Okay.
So when we look at the 10-day count, and if you all remember, we came to you and asked for additional teachers after the 10-day count because we needed extra teachers. But after that point, we monitor the numbers. So if we get a school, and we actually added a position late in the school year for one of our elementary schools because their numbers exceeded what we had hoped to honor for Title I schools. But if Title School were to go over to 25 students in a fourth or fifth grade class, we wouldn't necessarily have brought that to you all in the past because non-Title schools may have that many students. Now, that's arguable that you would prefer having Title schools at the lower ratios, even at fourth and fifth grade, because we know that's where the gap very much widens, and sometimes intervention services aren't quite the same. Or a student transfers into us and has been in numerous schools by that time in their educational career. So they've not had the stability of District 5 curriculum and instruction. So there's a lot of variables that impact fourth and fifth grade that not necessarily have the same impact at the primary grades of kindergarten through third grade. Does Does that
Yes,
answer what you were
that
looking
helps me,
for?
because I figured we had a different, we might have a different ratio, but I didn't know it sort of stopped at fourth and fifth for
Yes,
Title
ma'am.
I. Thank you.
I really hadn't weighed in on this, but one of the things that came very evident tonight, a number of people spoke, and from all segments of our community, include our teachers, administrators, the business owners, our elected officials, other elected officials, and taxpayers who are concerned about businesses, and we all understand that. One thing that people may sit or see things just a little differently on either side of it, but one thing comes through pretty quickly, almost from every speaker to the person, is that they love the schools and School District 5. And we know, Dr. Hefner, that we have something extraordinary. This community knows that. And I applaud the efforts that people are trying to put their thinking caps on. Dr. Richardson, I'll go ahead and give you your doctorate because you've probably earned that. But I appreciate the fact that each time we've dealt with this, you have continued to refine it, look for every dollar that can be there. And I'm amazed, and it hurts to look at these reductions. I know we don't really relish any of the reductions. We think things that were in place were necessary, and I know some things have changed that. The encouragement I have, and I did see this happen on Thursday when we were with some of our legislators, is that they seem to be willing, or Nathan Ballantyne was there, he said, seemed to understand that we were in a quagmire. And we didn't put ourselves there, and I'm not going to blame it totally on the legislature, but the Act 388 has put us where we are. Our hands are, it's like playing a ball game, Mr. Halterwanger, with one hand tied just a little bit behind your back. It makes it difficult. And Ms. Hammond, you mentioned the surveys. I'm encouraged by that.
Yes, I brought you one.
And I'll pledge you this, if they come up with a great solution and it funds where we need to be, we can always roll back millage. Unless they pass a law saying we can't do that. So I would hope that I think that conversation's happening not just in the Lexington, Richland 5 type districts. And I think they are hearing from a lot of people. So I'm encouraged by that. I didn't know about that. But I think that will be a move. I'm a pretty much an optimistic person, and I will tell you that next year's an election year in the legislature, and sometimes things don't happen freely with that. So my best hope is they'll get surveys back. Businesses, we had business owners tonight speak very eloquently about their situation, and I appreciate that. The thing that, and I don't need to repeat this, but I am, Act 388 was an ill-advised piece of legislation that sort of took away one of the tenets of taxation, was talking about keeping a number of different sources of income from different taxes. And one of the major sources of that, which everybody enjoyed, myself included, was a reduction in my property tax and all homeowner property taxes for school operation. And if you look at your tax bills, that's a major reduction. It's a big minus on there each year. We all enjoy it, but something had to make it up. When it was passed, unfortunately, our economy took probably the worst dive it's had since the Great Depression. And we're not out of that by any means. I don't know if sales tax will ever fill the gap. I think it's beginning to do better than it was intended to do. I know that the things you mentioned, Dr. Hefner, are not anything that you want to do. I don't think it's anything anybody on this board wants to do. And I hope we won't get to that point. The truth and reality is 90% or about 90% of our budget are our persons and personnel that actually do these programs. And I was really, Mr. White's presentation, and I know he's been working on that. I appreciate him doing it. I think it means it's very revealing, and we do hear people saying a lot of times we're top-heavy in administration. But the fact is we're not top-heavy in administration. Every administrative job that occurs in this district means that a teacher or a classroom person doesn't have to do that. They don't have to drive the buses or work the cafeteria, those things. So, and I think we're as lean or leaner than most districts like us or around us. I don't know the solution. I'm very interested to see what may come in the future, but I'm also interested in the fact that even if we go to this full millage piece, we don't solve our problem, and that the recurring items that are unfunded compound year after year, and I think that graph showed that. So I think we're in that quagmire. I appreciate your goals, Dr. Hefner, not to eliminate people's jobs. I think everybody appreciates that. And I hope at some point we can come out of this. I've lived in this district 40-some years. It was the case when I got here. It's the case now. People in this district expect great things from education in School District 5. And I would agree with whoever said it. I don't know who said it at the podium. I think we're the best school district in the state, and I think we compete with anybody on a national scale. So I don't know exactly where we go, but I do appreciate everybody's thought process. And I don't think there's room for error in this. Unfortunately, I wish there was a magic bullet, and I'm hoping that the legislators do wake up to this. Thank you. Ms. Hammond.